Hi, I'm Chris Sullivan, director of Control Your Emotions, Prelude to Orbit of Minor Satellites. The Orbit of Minor Satellites and Control Your Emotions as well has an inspirational point from a book called The Autobiography of a Schizophrenic Girl, where someone has something called hyperphrenic schizophrenia, where they imagine that there's a world that runs their lives or their ideas. So from there came this idea of like, well, what if that world is imagining this world? And I'm also very fascinated by psychology and psychiatry, and so I want to do a piece about the weird and odd relationships between patients and psychiatric doctors. My main difficulty with making this film has been that I seem to imagine that I have 100 people working for me, which I don't. I have about 3 or 4 at any given moment, sometimes just 2. But so I'm trying to make a feature animation with maybe the budget in the end I will have spent $250,000 or something, but that's basically coming out of my own pocket primarily over the years. The other thing is aesthetically, I do like to keep things open and I make changes. There's been important things that are in the film that you wouldn't imagine weren't always there, but they were just created in the last 2 years. But hopefully it'll all work out. I guess what I hope to do with this film is create a cinematic experience where people get kind of lost in the world, but not to the point that they want to escape it, that they feel drawn into it. And I also want to create this world between live action and animation. I think of things like watching Gulliver's Travels when I was a kid, or King Kong. So like the idea that maybe in this film, the live action people are, maybe those are the cartoons and the animated stuff is kind of the interior souls of the characters. I guess mainly I want to create something that's powerful and I hope beautiful and I hope moves people, because that's what I like happening. I like when the films end, if you end up being someone else at the end of it. So that's what I hope. So The Orbit of Minor Satellites, which is a feature film that I've been working on for, I'd say about 7 years solid, being produced by me and several other granting organizations, but also by New Deer. It is a film about a psychiatrist and their patient, and it's also kind of a star patient, so this person's identity has been writing books about this patient. It's also about an imaginary world or hallucinatory world, might be real and also might be prophetic. I've always liked this idea that you might find the cure for something in something very unexpected, or how does catastrophe create some sort of openness. The film is also strangely about children dying too. Someone leaves the house to go to school or to do whatever and then never returns. And then how does one kind of live beyond that moment, beyond that regret or that guilt of being a survivor? So survival's guilt is another really important thing in the film. So the buffalo in my film came upon accidentally about 2 years into the film. I ended up using voices of Boris Karloff, pulling them from radio shows. Then it became this kind of call and response. The more I would search, the more I would find things that he said that fit into my story. And many of the plays that he would do were about killing people. But in my film, it's about an accident. And so it's the similar kinds of things, similar feelings of guilt, similar feelings of seeing a lifeless body in front of you. And one thing is that I still am not quite sure what it means, but I know it feels right. And the buffalo ends up being almost like a totem of Rosemary, who's the girl in Control Your Emotions, who's being talked to by the psychiatrist. And I'm also interested in educational films, as you will see in the piece Control Your Emotions. So in terms of the idea of mental illness and debilitating mental illness, which is definitely part of my film, and the other theme of survival's guilt, I often feel that had my life not unfolded in a certain way, had I not given, let's say, the open window of being an artist or being able to teach something unconcrete like, filmmaking, that I could have very easily become someone who suffered from schizophrenia, or at least hallucinations, some sort of mania and depression. I'm very melancholic in my mind, but I found a way of that being like a pleasant place, kind of a peaceful place, kind of like a rainy night through the window kind of feeling. So I've turned, what could be depression into kind of this positive loss or something like that. So that's my connection with mental illness. And I hope this film leaves it in a very open-ended way when it's done. My relationship between Japanese film, Japanese animation, and Japanese literature is something very particular in terms of surrealism made normal. I really love what I guess I call absurdist cinema, Survival Style 5 or Funky Forest, Taste of Tea. These films that don't try to announce their strangeness, but just let it kind of come and unfold. And that's what I hope happens with my animation. Japan's the only country that actually makes animations for adults, and that's something that I do with my work. My films have been received in Japan, and I've gotten support, which has been wonderful. Both New Deer and Nobuako and people like Koji Yamamura or Yurika Mizushuri are people that have, I've been very excited to meet and have been very inspired by their work too. And Ryo Hirano is another very favorite of mine. Thank you, Japan. And I'm so excited to be part of this wonderful collection of films, From Fingers to the Universe. Hope you enjoy it all.